He didn't run when the police came for him. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He didn't ask where his children were. Christian Michael Longo stepped forward calmly, hands at his sides, eyes steady. Witnesses would later say there was nothing frantic about him, nothing desperate, nothing that looked like a man whose entire family had just been found dead. Because by the time police placed him in handcuffs, Christian Longo had already moved on. His wife was dead, his children were dead, and he was already living a new life. That is what makes this case so disturbing. Not just the brutality of the murders, but the performance that never stopped. The lies didn't end when his family died. They didn't end when he fled the country. They didn't end when he was caught. They didn't even end when he was sentenced to death. Christian Longo didn't just kill his family. He tried to outlive the truth. And to understand how he could do that, we have to go back long before the bodies were found, long before the beach parties in Mexico, long before the stolen identity. We have to go back to the making of the mask. Welcome to Unimaginable True Crimes. Here, we expose the unimaginable, one case at a time. Christian Michael Longo was born on January 23, 1974 in Iowa, but he grew up in Ypsilanti Township, Michigan. His childhood unfolded inside the strict boundaries of a Jehovah's Witness household. This matters. In high-controlled religious environments, reputation is currency. How you appear to others can matter as much as, or more than, who you actually are. Obedience, order, and outward righteousness are praised. Shame is a powerful tool. From an early age, Christian learned something very specific. Being seen the right way mattered. To neighbors and congregation members, he appeared polite, intelligent, and ambitious. He spoke well. He carried himself with confidence. He had a presence that made people listen. Even as a teenager, he knew how to project potential, the sense that he was destined for something bigger. But underneath that charm was something hollow. Christian didn't just want success, he wanted admiration. And when admiration wasn't earned, he learned how to manufacture it. Christian met Mary Jane Baker at a Kingdom Hall parking lot, the shared space of their religious community. She was 25 years old, he was 19. Mary Jane was everything Christian wasn't pretending to be. She was sincere, grounded, devoted. She believed in commitment, in family, in building a life slowly and honestly. They married quickly, and soon they had children. Zachary was born first, energetic, curious, full of life. Then came Sadie, gentle, affectionate, trusting. And finally, Madison, the baby of the family, just 2 years old, barely forming full sentences. From the outside, the Longo family looked ideal. Christian played with the kids, he helped around the house, he spoke lovingly about fatherhood. To friends and extended family, he seemed involved and attentive. Some even said he made other husbands look bad, always present, always helpful. But this is where the truth splits from the image. Christian didn't see his family as people, he saw them as proof. Proof that he was successful, proof that he was admirable, proof that he mattered. And the moment his family stopped serving that purpose, they became a problem. Christian Longo was obsessed with appearances, especially financial success. He wanted the house, the cars, the lifestyle. But he lacked the discipline, patience, and ethics to earn it legitimately. So he cheated. He wrote fraudulent checks. He stole credit card information. He took vehicles under false pretenses and never returned them. He accumulated debts with no intention of paying them. And whenever consequences approached, Christian did what he always did. He performed remorse. He cried when it was useful. He apologized when it bought him time. He convinced people he was just a struggling family man who'd made a mistake. And again, it worked. Courts were lenient. Employers gave him second chances. Friends believed his stories. Each escape reinforced the lesson. Lies were easier than accountability. As debts piled up and fraud investigations closed in, the Longo family moved repeatedly. Michigan, Ohio, then Oregon. Every move was framed as a fresh start, a new opportunity, a better future. But the pattern never changed. In one of their earlier residences, a warehouse-style space in Ohio, police would later uncover two chilling items: a book titled The Modern Identity Changer and a Spanish phrase book. At the time, no one noticed. Later, those items would read like a blueprint. Christian wasn't just planning to escape debt, he was learning how to become someone else. By May 2000, the facade inside the marriage was collapsing. Mary Jane discovered emails between Christian and another woman, evidence of an affair. She called her sister, devastated. But what Christian said next revealed something far darker than infidelity. He told Mary Jane he didn't love her anymore. He told her he resented how much attention she gave the children. Let that sink in. A mother's devotion to her children, the most natural bond imaginable, was something Christian viewed as competition. In his mind, love was not something shared, it was something owed to him. This is the psychology of a narcissist. People don't exist as individuals, they exist as extensions. And when those extensions fail to perform, they are discarded. Still, Mary Jane stayed. Why? Faith, hope, 3 small children, no clear way out. And Christian knew it. In September 2001, the Longos settled near Newport, Oregon, on the coast. Christian found part-time work at a Starbucks inside a Fred Meyer store, earning just over $7 an hour. But to landlords and acquaintances, he claimed he worked for the telephone company. The condominium they rented was far beyond their means. Within weeks, they were behind on rent. And something else changed. Christian began minimizing how many children he had when speaking to new people. Sometimes he said 1, sometimes 2, rarely all 3. It was subtle but telling. Why would a father erase his children from his own narrative? Saturday, December 15, 2001, a babysitter, Denise Thompson, watched Zachary, Sadie, and Madison while Christian and Mary Jane went out together. The night was uneventful. The kids played, they ate, they laughed. Around 10:30 p.m., Christian and Mary Jane returned home. They thanked Denise, gathered the children, and closed the door behind her. That was the last time anyone besides Christian Longo saw Mary Jane and the children alive. Inside that home, something changed forever. What happened next would unfold over days, not minutes. This was not a moment of rage. This was not a snap decision. It was methodical, deliberate, and planned. What makes this case so disturbing isn't just what Christian Longo did, it's how normal everything looked before it happened. No history of violence, no public breakdown, no warning sirens. Just a man who had spent his entire life lying, finally realizing the lies were collapsing. And rather than face exposure, he chose annihilation. In the next chapter, we'll walk through the night everything ended and the calculated steps that followed. Because once the mask slipped, Christian didn't panic. He packed and he ran.
There is a moment in every crime where the world splits into before and after. For Christian Longo, that moment did not come with panic or chaos. It came with silence. After the door closed behind the babysitter on the night of December 15, 2001, the Longo home fell quiet. The rain tapped against the windows. The Oregon coast settled into darkness. And inside that condominium, Christian Longo made a decision that would erase 4 lives and expose who he had been all along. What followed was not a blur of violence. It was a sequence, a man executing a plan. Mary Jane Longo was killed first. According to court findings and forensic evidence, Christian strangled his wife manually. This was not quick. This was not accidental. Strangulation requires sustained pressure, minutes of force, uninterrupted, intentional. This matters. Strangulation is one of the clearest indicators of deliberate homicide. It requires proximity, control, and time. It is an act that allows the killer to stop and then continue. Christian didn't stop. After Mary Jane was dead, he placed her body into a suitcase. Think about that act, zipping a suitcase around the woman who had devoted her life to their children, folding her body into a container designed for travel, for movement, for escape. It wasn't rage, it was preparation. Next came Madison, the youngest, 2 years old, barely old enough to speak in full sentences. Christian strangled her as well. The prosecution would later argue this was done because she was inconvenient, a child too young to be left alone, too young to understand, too young to survive what he had planned next. Her body was placed into a separate suitcase. 2 suitcases now sat inside the home. 2 lives contained, 2 problems packaged for disposal. And still, Christian was not finished. Zachary and Sadie were still alive. 4-year-old Zachary, 3-year-old Sadie. Investigators believe Christian loaded them into the vehicle while they were sleeping. It is possible they never woke fully. It is possible they trusted they were being taken somewhere safe. Children trust their parents instinctively. They don't question. They don't resist. That trust is what makes what happened next almost impossible to comprehend. Christian drove through the cold Oregon night toward a bridge spanning the Yaquina Bay near Waldport. The water below was dark, frigid, and unforgiving. Before arriving, he prepared weights, pillowcases filled with rocks. He tied them to his children's legs, not afterward, before. This was not panic, this was intention. What happened on that bridge is one of the most disturbing acts in modern true crime. Christian stopped the vehicle. He got out. He lifted his children. There was no evidence they were unconscious. There was no evidence of mercy. Zachary and Sadie were thrown into the water alive. The pillowcases ensured they would sink. Cold water shocks the body instantly. Muscles seize, lungs fill, panic sets in. The children did not understand why their father was doing this. They did not understand that they were being killed. And that is what makes this crime so uniquely horrifying. Not just the act itself, but the betrayal of the most sacred bond that exists. At approximately 4:30 a.m., a construction worker noticed a red minivan stopped on the bridge. He pulled over and asked the driver if everything was okay. The man behind the wheel was calm, polite, friendly. He said the check engine light had come on. That man was Christian Longo. His children were already dead in the water below. He did not panic. He did not flee. He did not show fear. The performance continued. Christian wasn't finished. He drove to the Embarcadero Marina. There, he dumped the suitcases containing Mary Jane and Madison into the water, weighted with dumbbells to ensure they would sink. A mother and her baby daughter disappeared beneath the surface, hidden beneath a dock, out of sight. Christian went home. He slept. In the days that followed, Christian told coworkers that Mary Jane had left him. He implied she was having an affair. He suggested Madison might not even be his child. This detail matters. Even after killing his wife, Christian tried to destroy her reputation. He needed a narrative where he was the victim, abandoned, betrayed, misunderstood. Because in his mind, the story always mattered more than the truth. On December 19, 2001, a fisherman spotted something in the water. It was a child's body.
4-year-old Zachary Longo. Police released his photograph to the media, hoping someone would recognize him. Denise Thompson, the babysitter, saw the image and felt her stomach drop. She knew that face. 3 days later, Sadie's body was found. The pillowcase was still tied to her legs. And on December 27th, divers opened the suitcases beneath the marina dock. Inside were Mary Jane and Madison, an entire family erased. While investigators recovered bodies, Christian Longo was on a beach in Mexico. He had prepared for this moment long before. At his workplace, police found obituaries with social security numbers written on them, stolen identities. He used one in particular, Michael Finkel, a real journalist who had recently been fired from the New York Times for fabricating elements of a story. The irony was brutal. Christian Longo, a man built entirely on lies, took the name of a disgraced liar. In Tulum, near Cancun, he checked into a seaside resort. He drank, he partied, he flirted, he romanced a German tourist. He introduced himself as a New York Times journalist. His children were dead, and Christian Longo was finally living the life he always wanted. On January 11, 2002, Christian Longo was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, alongside Osama bin Laden. 2 days later, Canadian tourists recognized him from media coverage. On January 13th, he was arrested in Tulum without resistance. The mask slipped briefly. Back in Oregon, Christian Longo made a stunning legal move. He pleaded guilty to killing Mary Jane and Madison, but he claimed innocence in the deaths of Zachary and Sadie. His defense? He claimed Mary Jane killed the 2 older children and that he killed her in response. This was not just a lie, it was an attempt to turn a murdered woman into a villain, to use her corpse as a shield. The prosecution dismantled the story. Forensics showed all 4 deaths were consistent with Christian acting alone. His immediate flight, his partying, his stolen identity. The jury saw through the performance. Christian Longo was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death. Even on death row, Christian did not stop. He wrote editorials, he founded an organization, he launched a campaign to donate his organs after execution. On the surface, it looked like remorse, but those who knew his history saw the pattern. A new role, a new audience, a new mask, because Christian Longo never stopped needing admiration. Was the organ donation campaign genuine, or was it simply the final act of a man who could not exist without applause?
Prison is supposed to strip people of power. It removes freedom, control, and identity. For most inmates, incarceration is where the performance stops, where the truth finally catches up. But Christian Longo was not like most inmates. For him, prison was not an ending. It was a new stage. In 2003, Christian Michael Longo was officially sentenced to death for the murders of his wife, Mary Jane, and their 3 children, Zachary, Sadie, and Madison. The courtroom expected remorse. They expected tears. They expected collapse. Instead, they got composure. Christian stood calmly as the sentence was read. His posture was controlled, his expression neutral. Observers would later say he looked more disappointed than devastated, as if something had gone wrong, not as if lives had been destroyed. That distinction matters, because Christian Longo did not see himself as a monster. He saw himself as a man whose story had been misunderstood, and he wasn't done rewriting it. Death row is designed for isolation. Inmates spend most of their time alone, with limited interaction, restricted communication, and constant supervision. For someone like Christian Longo, a man fueled by attention, validation, and admiration, this should have been unbearable. Instead, he adapted. He began writing letters, essays, reflections.
He cultivated relationships with people outside prison walls, journalists, activists, religious figures, and curious members of the public. Many of them believed they were engaging with a man seeking redemption. They were wrong. Christian wasn't confessing, he was branding. In March 2011, the world saw Christian Longo again, not as a murderer, but as a thinker. The New York Times published an op-ed written by Longo titled "Giving Life After Death Row." In it, Christian admitted guilt, carefully worded, tightly controlled, and announced his desire to donate his organs after execution. At first glance, the piece was disarming. He spoke of responsibility. He spoke of loss. He spoke of giving back. He even founded an organization designed to promote organ donation by death row inmates. To many readers, it looked like transformation. To those who understood Longo, it looked familiar. Christian Longo's entire life followed the same cycle. 1. Failure. 2. Reinvention. 3. Admiration. 4. Exposure. 5. Repeat. When he couldn't be a successful businessman, he became a devoted family man. When that collapsed, he became a journalist. When that failed, he became a humanitarian. Each version served the same purpose: to control how he was seen. Even on death row, Christian needed an audience. One of the most unsettling relationships Longo formed was with journalist Michael Finkel, the very man whose identity he had stolen while fleeing to Mexico. Finkel began corresponding with Longo. They talked philosophy, they talked guilt, they talked storytelling. Eventually, Finkel wrote a book about their relationship. Here's what makes this disturbing. Christian Longo didn't just lie to Finkel in the past, he manipulated him in the present. He convinced Finkel that he was remorseful, that he had changed, that the organ donation campaign was sincere. Even Finkel's wife expressed discomfort with the relationship, sensing something wasn't right. And she was right. Behind the scenes, another truth was emerging. According to prison records and later investigative reporting, Christian Longo was writing explicit sexual letters to men on the outside, men who paid him for the content. In prison slang, these men are called ATMs, automated sources of money. Christian was making income by crafting fantasies, tailoring personas, selling intimacy. The same skills he used to seduce friends, colleagues, and lovers on the outside were now being monetized behind bars. He was still performing, still lying, still manipulating. Even among fellow inmates, Christian told stories. He claimed he had been a stock trader. He claimed he had been wealthy. He claimed he had lived an extraordinary life. None of it was true. But truth had never been the currency he traded in. Perception was. Psychologists who reviewed Longo's behavior noted traits consistent with compensatory narcissistic personality disorder. In simple terms, a deep sense of inadequacy masked by grandiosity. Christian could not tolerate being ordinary. Failure was not an obstacle, it was an existential threat. And when his family threatened the image he wanted to project, when bills piled up, lies collapsed, and reality intruded, he eliminated the problem. Not because he hated them, but because they no longer served the story he wanted to tell. In December 2022, Oregon Governor Kate Brown commuted all death sentences in the state. Christian Longo's punishment was changed to life without the possibility of parole. No execution, no organ donation, no final redemption narrative. For most inmates, this would be devastating. For Christian Longo, it was just another rewrite. He still had time, still had words, still had people to influence. The Christian Longo case is not just about murder, it is about performance. It is about how some predators do not seek power through violence alone, but through belief. Christian didn't want to be feared, he wanted to be admired. Even after killing his family, even after being sentenced to die, even after the world knew his name, he never stopped auditioning for redemption. Here's the question that lingers, and it should disturb you. How many people believed him? How many readers of that op-ed felt sympathy? How many supporters donated to his cause? How many correspondents wrote back thinking they were helping a man change? Christian Longo proved something terrifying. Some predators don't stop manipulating when they're caught. They just change their script.
Every major true crime case leaves behind a trail of evidence that didn't seem important at the time. Moments dismissed as misunderstandings, behaviors explained away as stress, red flags that only become obvious after the damage is done. The Christian Longo case is no different. In fact, it may be one of the clearest examples of how warning signs can appear in plain sight repeatedly and still go unrecognized until it's too late. After crimes like this, people often ask the same question: what made him snap? But Christian Longo didn't snap. He unraveled slowly, and the signs were there long before December 2001. Christian Longo's relationship with truth was never casual. From his teenage years onward, lying wasn't a tactic, it was a lifestyle. He exaggerated achievements, invented professional success, borrowed credibility he hadn't earned. People close to him later recalled how easily he shifted stories depending on who he was talking to. If someone challenged him, he didn't correct the lie, he built a better one. This wasn't harmless embellishment, it was identity construction. Christian didn't know who he was, only who he wanted to appear to be. Long before the murders, Christian was already committing serious crimes: check fraud, identity theft, vehicle theft. Each time he was caught, the outcome was the same. He apologized convincingly. He performed remorse. He was given another chance. The justice system saw a young man with a family, a good father, someone who made a mistake. But mistakes repeat, patterns persist, and Christian's pattern was clear. He committed crimes to maintain an image and expected forgiveness when exposed. That expectation of forgiveness is critical. It taught him something dangerous. Every time Christian avoided serious consequences, it reinforced a belief: I can talk my way out of anything. That belief would later extend to the ultimate crime. If he could lie his way out of fraud, if he could charm probation officers, if he could convince landlords and co-workers, why not this? By 2001, Christian Longo's life was closing in on him. Deaths were mounting, probation obligations loomed, his lies were colliding with reality. He was working a low-wage job at Starbucks, a humiliating reality for someone obsessed with appearing successful. And humiliation is a trigger for narcissistic collapse. For individuals like Christian, failure doesn't feel temporary, it feels annihilating. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Christian Longo didn't just fail his family, he resented them. Mary Jane's devotion to the children wasn't seen as love, it was competition, attention that wasn't directed at him. To Christian, his children weren't individuals, they were responsibilities, expenses, obstacles. That mindset didn't begin in Oregon, it developed over years. 18 months before the murders, Mary Jane discovered emails revealing Christian's affair. When confronted, he didn't deny it. Instead, he said something chilling. He told her he didn't love her anymore. He told her he resented how much she focused on the children. That moment should have been a turning point, but Mary Jane stayed. Not because she was weak, but because leaving is often the most dangerous moment for a woman in a controlling relationship, and because faith, children, and hope can keep people trapped longer than fear. The Longo family moved constantly: Michigan, Ohio, Oregon. Each move followed the same pattern: debt, exposure, escape. Moving wasn't about opportunity, it was about avoiding accountability. And yet, no one connected the dots. In Oregon, Christian did something subtle but deeply disturbing. He began telling people he had fewer children than he actually did. Sometimes 2, sometimes 1, rarely 3. Why would a father erase his own children verbally? Investigators later viewed this as psychological distancing, a precursor to violence.
When people stop acknowledging someone's existence, it's often because they're already imagining a world without them. Christian didn't look dangerous. That's the most unsettling part. He was articulate, soft-spoken, helpful. Neighbors trusted him. Co-workers liked him. Babysitters saw a devoted dad. This is what predators rely on. Not intimidation, credibility. Christian Longo slipped through multiple systems. The justice system, which repeatedly treated his crimes as isolated mistakes. Employers who never verified his claims. Landlords who accepted his performance. Communities who equated politeness with safety. No single failure caused the tragedy, but together they created the perfect environment for it. This is the question that haunts the case. And the honest answer is complicated. There was no single moment where someone could have intervened and prevented everything, but there were dozens of moments where accountability could have changed the trajectory. Stronger consequences for fraud, closer monitoring during probation, recognition of escalating behavior. Christian Longo wasn't invisible, he was ignored. The most dangerous predators don't look like monsters. They look like the coworker who always has an excuse, the neighbor who seems too nice, the man who is always starting over. Christian Longo reminds us that charm is not character, and that sometimes the most horrifying violence comes not from rage, but from entitlement.
When the verdict was read and Christian Longo was led away in chains, many people assumed the story was over. Justice served, the killer caught, the danger removed. But true crime doesn't end with a sentence. For the families left behind, for the communities that trusted him, and for the people who still struggle to understand how this happened, the real story was only beginning. The Oregon coast is not a place accustomed to horror. It's quiet, insular, the kind of place where strangers are noticed and families are remembered. When the bodies of the Longo family were recovered, the community was stunned, not only by the brutality of the crime, but by who committed it. Christian Longo wasn't an outsider. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't that guy everyone worried about. He was a husband, a father, a co-worker, a neighbor. That realization cut deeper than the crime itself, because it meant the danger hadn't come from outside the community. It had been living inside it. In many true crime cases, perpetrators dominate the narrative, but the Longo case forces a reckoning with something far more important, the lives that were erased. Mary Jane Longo was more than a victim. She was a mother who centered her life around her children, a sister who reached out for help when things felt wrong, a woman who stayed not because she was naive, but because she believed in loyalty, faith, and responsibility. Zachary was 4 years old, energetic, curious, full of motion. Sadie was 3, gentle, observant, closely bonded to her brother. Madison was 2, barely beginning her life. They were not symbols, they were people, and they were denied futures they never had the chance to imagine. Media coverage of the case was intense. The images were haunting, the details were shocking, the narrative irresistible. But something subtle happened as the story spread. Christian Longo became the focus, his lies, his escape, his charm, his manipulation. This is a dangerous pattern in true crime. When perpetrators become the centerpiece, they get what they crave most: attention. And Christian Longo understood that instinctively. For years, the case carried an assumption: at least he'll be executed. That belief provided emotional closure for some, but closure is fragile. In 2022, when Oregon commuted all death sentences, Christian Longo's punishment became life without parole. No execution, no final moment of accountability, no ending that felt definitive. For the victims' families, it reopened wounds because justice once again felt incomplete. Christian Longo's organ donation campaign resurfaced after the commutation. Supporters framed it as wasted potential, lives that could have been saved. Critics saw it for what it likely was:
another performance. The truth is uncomfortable. Even acts that appear altruistic can be rooted in narcissism. Christian didn't just want to give something back. He wanted to be remembered differently, as someone meaningful, as someone complex, as someone who mattered. That desire never left him. The Longo case is now studied not just as a crime, but as a psychological profile. It appears in discussions about compensatory narcissism, identity fabrication, family annihilators, coercive control, image-driven violence. Christian Longo didn't kill out of passion or impulse. He killed to erase failure, to reset the narrative, to escape the version of himself he couldn't tolerate. That makes this case especially disturbing, because it suggests that violence, in some minds, becomes a tool for self-preservation. In the years since, law enforcement agencies and courts have become more attentive to patterns of deception, repeated fraud, chronic identity shifting, escalating lies. These are now recognized as potential indicators of deeper danger. But change is slow, and cases like this remind us how easily charisma can override caution. Friends replayed conversations, co-workers questioned memories, neighbors wondered if they ignored something obvious. This is the hidden cost of crimes like this. They don't just destroy families, they fracture trust. They make people doubt their judgment, their instincts, their ability to read others. The Christian Longo case dismantles a comforting myth. Evil does not always announce itself. It doesn't always look angry. It doesn't always look unstable. It doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks responsible. Sometimes it looks charming. Sometimes it looks like a man holding his children's hands. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Today, Christian Longo remains in prison. He will never walk free, but the questions he leaves behind remain unsettled. Was there a moment when this could have been stopped? Was anyone responsible besides him? How many warning signs do we still ignore today? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, how many people like Christian Longo are still performing right now, undetected?
There is a special category of crime that leaves even seasoned investigators shaken, not because it is loud, not because it is chaotic, but because it violates something fundamental: a parent killing their own family. These crimes don't just break laws, they shatter assumptions. They force us to confront a question we're not prepared to answer. How does someone destroy the very people they are biologically wired to protect? Christian Longo did not invent this crime, but he fits it with chilling precision. The term family annihilator refers to individuals who kill their spouse and children in a single event or over a short period of time. These crimes are rare, but when they happen, they leave devastation that ripples far beyond the victims. Criminologists have identified 4 general types of family annihilators. Self-righteous, blames spouse, spares self. Disappointed, sees family as having failed expectations. Anomic, kills family after financial or social collapse. Paranoid, believes death protects the family from imagined threats. Christian Longo fits most closely into the anomic and disappointed categories, and that matters. For anomic family annihilators, failure is not something to survive, it is something to erase. Christian Longo's life was built on aspiration without foundation. He wanted wealth, status, respect, but he lacked discipline, ethics, and patience. Each lie pushed the collapse further down the road until the collapse became unavoidable. When debts mounted and lies converged, Christian faced a reality he could not tolerate. He was ordinary, he was failing, and people were about to see it. For someone with compensatory narcissistic traits, exposure feels like annihilation, so he chose annihilation for everyone else. This is the question people ask most often. Why not divorce? Why not run away alone? Why not admit failure? Because for Christian Longo, leaving meant losing the story. He didn't just want escape, he wanted a reset, a clean slate where no one could contradict the narrative he planned to tell next. A family still alive would be evidence. Children ask questions. Wives speak. Memories remain. Dead people do not. This is one of the most disturbing elements of family annihilation. The killer doesn't just eliminate people, they attempt to control how they are remembered. Christian Longo tried to do exactly that. He implied Mary Jane was unfaithful. He questioned Madison's paternity. He claimed Mary Jane killed the children. Even in death, he tried to shape the story, because memory is power, and Christian Longo needed power more than he needed life itself. Family annihilators often share a core belief. My family exists because of me, therefore I can decide when they stop existing. This is entitlement taken to its most extreme form. Christian Longo viewed his wife and children as extensions of himself. When they no longer supported the image he wanted, they became liabilities. This is not hatred, it is objectification. And objectification is what makes murder possible. Looking back, the signs align with known family annihilator patterns: chronic lying and fraud, financial collapse paired with image obsession, minimizing or erasing children verbally, resentment towards spouses' devotion to children, repeated reinvention attempts. These are not definitive predictors, but together they form a dangerous constellation. Christian Longo did not snap. He reached the end of his illusion. Family annihilation triggers a deeper emotional response than most crimes, because it forces us to confront something we rely on for safety, the assumption that parents protect. When that assumption fails, the world feels unstable. If a father can do this, what else is possible? Another recurring theme in family annihilation cases is collective disbelief. Neighbors often say, "He seemed like a great dad. They looked like the perfect family. We never imagined." That disbelief isn't accidental. Many annihilators are socially functional. They perform competence. They mimic responsibility. They blend in. Christian Longo did exactly that. Charisma lowers defenses. It replaces scrutiny with trust. Christian Longo didn't intimidate people. He reassured them. That made him invisible. This is perhaps the hardest truth to accept. For family annihilators like Longo, children are not hated. They are inconvenient. They represent financial burden, emotional responsibility, permanent ties to a failed identity. When annihilators imagine starting over, children do not fit into that fantasy, so they remove them. Most family annihilators are men. This is not coincidence. Men are often socialized to equate worth with success. Failure becomes shame. Shame becomes rage. Rage becomes control. Christian Longo was not equipped to live with perceived failure, so he erased it. Family annihilation is difficult to predict because many warning signs are socially normalized. Financial stress is common. Relationship conflict is common. Lying is often minimized. But what separates annihilators is not stress, it is how they interpret stress. Christian Longo did not see hardship as temporary. He saw it as identity ending. After arrest, many annihilators attempt to rewrite the story. Confession, spiritual awakening, humanitarian gestures. These attempts often focus on legacy, not remorse. The Longo case challenges us to rethink what danger looks like. It is not always loud, it is not always angry, it is not always obvious. Sometimes it looks like competence, and sometimes that's the most dangerous disguise of all.
The justice system is designed to respond to crimes, but cases like Christian Longo expose a painful truth. By the time the system intervenes, the worst damage is often already done. Longo didn't evade justice because he was invisible.
He evaded justice because the system treated his warning signs as separate problems instead of a single escalating pattern. One of the justice system's greatest weaknesses is fragmentation. Fraud is handled here, probation violations there, domestic instability somewhere else. Each incident is evaluated on its own merits. Christian Longo exploited that structure perfectly. Check fraud was treated as financial misconduct, vehicle theft as a property crime, lying as a character flaw, not a threat indicator. No one asked the larger question: what kind of person repeatedly reinvents himself to avoid accountability? When Christian was convicted of fraud, he received probation. This was not unusual. He had no history of violence, he presented well, he spoke convincingly about remorse. Probation officers later acknowledged that he complied with surface-level requirements, meetings, paperwork, appearances. But compliance is not insight. Probation focuses on rules, not psychology, and Christian Longo was a master of rules. Multiple professionals encountered Longo over the years: judges, probation officers, employers, landlords, and nearly all of them reached the same conclusion: he seems reasonable. That assessment wasn't irrational, it was incomplete. The justice system is not trained to evaluate manipulative charisma as risk. Yet in cases like this, charisma isn't neutral, it's a weapon. Another systemic blind spot is coercive control. Christian Longo's marriage showed signs of emotional manipulation, financial domination, emotional withdrawal followed by reconciliation, repeated infidelity paired with blame, subtle isolation. None of these behaviors are crimes on their own, but together they form a pattern of control. And control, not rage, is often the precursor to annihilation. Financial crimes are often viewed as non-violent, but in cases like Longo's, fraud was not incidental, it was foundational. His fraud funded the image sustained the identity became non-negotiable. When the fraud collapsed, everything else followed. This is why some criminologists argue that chronic financial deception paired with identity inflation should be treated as a higher risk profile, especially when family members are financially dependent. Christian Longo moved repeatedly across state lines. Each move reset scrutiny. Each move erased context. Law enforcement databases did not easily connect patterns across jurisdictions at the time. Today, that's improving, but gaps remain. Mobility still allows people to shed reputations faster than records can follow. Perhaps the most sobering truth of this case is that no one failed alone. Each system did its job narrowly. Police investigated crimes that were reported. Courts sentenced what was charged. Employers hired based on interviews. Landlords rented based on references. But no system saw the whole man. Christian Longo existed in the spaces between institutions, and that's where predators thrive. After the murders, the system responded swiftly. Multi-state investigations, forensic analysis, high-profile prosecution. Justice arrived, but only after 4 lives were gone. This raises an uncomfortable question. Is justice enough if it only comes after total destruction? For years, the death sentence provided emotional resolution for some observers. It symbolized finality. But the commutation of death sentences in Oregon forced a reckoning. Punishment is not prevention. Execution does not undo harm. Life imprisonment does not restore trust. The real failure occurred long before sentencing. No system can predict every crime, but patterns matter. In hindsight, several interventions might have altered the trajectory. Stronger penalties for repeated fraud, deeper psychological evaluation during probation, recognition of escalating identity deception, better interjurisdictional data sharing. These are not guarantees, but they are opportunities. Christian Longo teaches us that the justice system, like society, is vulnerable to appearances. We want to believe the danger announces itself. We want villains to look like villains. But systems built on that assumption will always be late. because the most dangerous people are often the ones who seem least threatening. There is also a cultural element to this failure. We reward ambition, we forgive confidence, we overlook inconsistencies when someone seems capable. Christian Longo benefited from that bias. His ambition was admired, his stories were indulged, his contradictions excused, until they weren't. The Longo case is not an artifact of the past. The mechanisms that allowed him to slip through still exist. Fraud is still minimized, charm is still persuasive, systems are still siloed. Understanding this case is not about fear, it's about awareness. Prevention doesn't mean suspicion of everyone, it means recognizing patterns, repeated reinvention, escalating deception, identity collapse under pressure. These are not personality quirks, they are warning signs.
When a story like this ends, there's a temptation to close the book, to tell ourselves the danger is over, the monster is gone, the lesson has been learned. But the truth is more unsettling, because the Christian Longo case doesn't end with a sentence, a prison cell, or a final verdict. It ends with a question that refuses to go away. How much of this story felt familiar? There is a lie we want to believe about evil. We want to believe it announces itself, that it looks chaotic, broken, or visibly unstable, that it is easy to spot if you're paying attention. Christian Longo destroys that myth. He was not visibly violent. He was not socially isolated. He was not openly abusive. He was articulate. He was polite. He was convincing. And that makes him far more dangerous than the caricature of a villain we're taught to expect. Human beings are wired for pattern recognition. We look for consistency, for familiarity, for cues that signal safety. Christian Longo understood this instinct intuitively. He knew that if he looked like a devoted father, people would assume he was one. If he spoke like a professional, people would assume competence. If he expressed remorse, people would assume sincerity. He didn't need to be perfect, he just needed to be plausible. One of the most common phrases uttered after crimes like this is, "He seemed like a good guy." But seemed is not evidence, it's a feeling, and feelings can be manipulated. Christian Longo didn't rely on threats or force to move through the world. He relied on assumptions. The assumption that a father wouldn't harm his children. The assumption that a calm man must be stable. The assumption that someone who speaks well must mean well. Those assumptions protected him until they didn't. Another reason cases like this are so disturbing is that they force us to confront our own limitations. Because somewhere along the way, someone probably sensed something was off. A contradiction, a story that didn't quite add up, a feeling that lingered but was never voiced. And that feeling was likely dismissed, not out of malice, but out of politeness. We're taught not to accuse without proof, not to judge, not to assume the worst. Predators depend on that restraint. When Christian Longo murdered his family, the damage extended far beyond 4 lives. It rippled outward, to the babysitter who recognized Zachary's face in a flyer, to the co-workers who replayed conversations in their minds, to the neighbors who wondered if they had missed something obvious. These people became secondary victims, haunted not by what they saw, but by what they didn't. One of the most dangerous beliefs we carry is that normalcy equals safety, but normal is a performance. Christian Longo lived inside normalcy like armor. He worked, he socialized, he made plans, he smiled. And behind that normalcy was entitlement, resentment, and a complete absence of empathy. This case reminds us that normal behavior does not guarantee normal values. As the story expanded, Christian Longo's psychology became the focus. But we must pause here, because the danger of analysis is erasure. Zachary was not a statistic. Sadie was not a case detail. Madison was not collateral damage. They were children who trusted, children who did not understand betrayal, children who believed their father would protect them. That trust is what makes this crime unforgivable, and it's why this story should never be told casually.
Christian Longo's later attempts at reinvention, his writing, his campaigns, his carefully worded remorse, appealed to something deeply human. We want to believe people can change. We want redemption to be possible. We want meaning to come from tragedy. But redemption without accountability is just another performance, and Christian Longo never stopped performing. Christian admitted guilt eventually, but confession does not equal understanding. His admissions were controlled, selective, strategic. They revealed what he did, but not why. And more importantly, they did not center the people he destroyed. They centered him. That distinction matters. Some people ask whether forgiveness is possible in cases like this. That is not a question anyone else can answer. Forgiveness is personal. It belongs to the victim's loved ones, not the public, not the courts, not the killer. What is clear is that forgiveness does not require belief in a performance, and it does not require forgetting. The Christian Longo case forces a difficult reckoning. Trust is necessary, but it must be conscious. Blind trust is not kindness. Unquestioned belief is not compassion. And discomfort is not disrespect. If something feels wrong, it deserves attention, not dismissal. Christian Longo is not an anomaly. He is not a one-off. He is not a freak occurrence. He represents a category of individuals who prioritize identity over reality and will destroy anything that threatens that identity, including their own family. That is the warning. In an age of curated identities, online personas, and constant reinvention, the lessons of this case are more relevant than ever. People are not what they present. They are what they do, consistently, over time, under pressure. Christian Longo collapsed when the pressure arrived, and when he did, he chose erasure. As this story ends, there is no neat resolution, only a question. How much do we trust appearances because they're comforting? And how often do we ignore contradictions because they're inconvenient? Christian Longo wanted to control the narrative. He wanted to be remembered as complex, as misunderstood, as more than what he did. But history does not belong to him. It belongs to the truth. And the truth is simple. 4 lives were taken, trust was abused, and a performance ended in silence. If this documentary stayed with you, leave a respectful comment below. Tell us, do you believe Longo ever stopped pretending? Was the organ donation campaign an act of redemption or the last con? Join the conversation, but kindly. If this story held your attention, like the video, subscribe to Unimaginable True Crimes. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next investigation. Your support helps keep these stories accurate, respectful, and unforgettable. If you think Christian Longo was an expert at hiding behind a mask, the next case will disturb you even more. Because in the next story, the killer didn't run. He didn't party on a beach. He didn't brag or perform. He went to church every single week. For nearly 18 years, John List lived quietly in plain sight after murdering his entire family, writing letters, attending services, and blending into a new life while the world searched for him. How does a man erase his identity, keep his conscience silent, and remain free for nearly 20 years? That story is playing next. Don't miss it.